Hi, Max here with FrizWoods, and in this video I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about juvenile law here in Maryland. Chances are, if you're watching this video, you or perhaps your child has been involved in some way in the juvenile system and you're curious, how does it work here in Maryland? I'm going to break down the parties in the room for a juvenile case, talk a little bit about the track between charging and adjudication, and just give you some general advice with regards to the juvenile system. Let's jump right into it. First of all, how does my child get a juvenile charge in Maryland? Well, in Maryland, we have a specific set of laws for juvenile charges. There's very little overlap between juvenile and adult cases, although there are certain unique circumstances with children who are generally between 16 and 18 who could be charged as both juveniles and adults. And some of those common charges are firearms offenses and certain violent felonies like armed carjacking and armed robbery. Now, when it comes to a juvenile case, there are three players in the room. There's the state's attorney's office, who's prosecuting, representing the state. There's the respondent, your child, the defendant, but we call them respondent in juvenile court, and their attorney. And there's a third person in the room, and that's the Department of Juvenile Services. They're sort of a neutral third-party player in the mix here. Their job is to administer probations once juveniles are adjudicated, but their job is also to actually take the intake of cases. So they interface between the police and the state's attorney's office. So, how does my child get a juvenile charge? Well, first and foremost, a police officer has to file a charge against a child. And unlike an adult charge, it doesn't go through the commissioner's office. Instead, there's an intake with the Department of Juvenile Services. So, say for example, your child is involved with some sort of lunch money robbery. Your child's 14 years old. There's exclusive juvenile jurisdiction over the case. A police officer contacts the Department of Juvenile Services and provides them with the charges. Department of Juvenile Services is then tasked with doing an intake. An intake is a process by which the juvenile's information is identified as well as their parents. They're then notified and there's an appointment set up. We usually call that a screening. At that screening, the juvenile is informed of the charges, and the Department of Juvenile Services has a couple of options. Generally speaking, with misdemeanors and certain felonies, especially under the new laws here in Maryland, an informal can occur. So, for example, this was a second-degree assault for a school fight. An informal adjustment might mean that your child has to do some community service, write an apology letter. A victim may be able to object to that informal. We'll talk about that in a different video. But if there's an informal adjustment, the case usually ends there at the intake with the Department of Juvenile Services. Certain offenses, especially felonies, could be forwarded to the state's attorney's office for prosecution. So jumping back to the example of the lunch money robbery, that case would be forwarded to the state's attorney's office, who would have 30 days to file a petition with the juvenile court for your particular county where the offense occurred. When a state's attorney's office files a petition with the juvenile court, a civil action is now created against your child by the state of Maryland. It follows some of the traditional prosecution that you might see in adult court, but there are a few differences, and I'll talk about those here in this video. Number one, your child is not referred to as a defendant. They're referred to as a respondent. Number two, they're not entitled to a jury trial. In Maryland, you can have a jury trial for almost any criminal offense with a maximum penalty of over 90 days, and almost all felonies are in the exclusive jurisdiction of the circuit court. But instead, we allow a judge to handle the case. The same standard of proof applies beyond a reasonable doubt. Number three, juveniles are not guilty or not guilty. They are either involved or not involved. And number four, we do not do a sentencing. They're not sent to jail for X amount of months like you might be in a criminal case. Instead, we do an adjudication, and they are either in need of services and not in need of services, and they are either placed on a period of a supervised probation or perhaps a placement at a facility. And there are different tiers of different types of facilities that juveniles can be placed in Maryland, but we do not say you'll be going to juvenile placement for 10 months and sign here, and then they get shipped out. There's more of a tailored approach, and that's because our juvenile courts are rehabilitative courts. Everyone in the room, the prosecutor, the department, the respondent, and their attorney, even the judge, everyone is tasked with ensuring that the youth is rehabilitated. The goal here is to make sure that a child doesn't become an adult offender. If you find that your child's involved in the juvenile system, one of the most important things that you can do is contact an attorney who has experience in the juvenile courts. I myself was a juvenile prosecutor, and my partner spent almost a decade as a juvenile public defender. It's important to speak with an attorney who understands the juvenile system for your particular county because these are smaller courts and they generally involve different rules than adult trials do. Hearings have to happen within 60 days. It's a merits, not a trial. A lot of the motion practice actually happens during the trial, similar to what you might see in district court. If your child has a case and you'd like to discuss it with us, give us a call if you're here in Maryland. I'm sure we can help. Thanks.